Welcome back to OpenLine. We are talking about Nashville's flood plan. We have with us Scott Potter from Metro Water Services, the director, and I want to start talking about, I guess, the overall mitigation system. A lot of talk about what are we doing about downtown. You're saying that's all connected, but all right. So if someone asks, what are we doing about flooding in downtown? You know, what do you say there?
All right. The downtown flood mitigation system is a component of the Unified Flood Preparedness Plan. It's specific to downtown because it addresses what we term as the downtown damage center. In the plan, there are 22 damage centers that we identified all throughout the Cumberland River and the tributaries. This is one. It's a significant one because it is a dramatic approach, and it is a little bit more expensive than people might think. But it is a system, and if I could, I'd like to explain generally how it works. So, back in the 50s, all of the streams that I told you about in 1885, they came down the hill and they dumped right into the river all the time. So all the sewage, all the rain, everything went right to the river. Until about 1953, 1954, the city built what's called an interceptor along the river that goes all the way from, I guess, the Mill Creek area all the way to our central wastewater plant at the top of 2nd Avenue. So we intercepted all of that flow that's coming down the hill into a great big pipe, and it's really, really big. It's, multiple feet in diameter, and that takes the water to the central plant to be cleaned and restored to the river. So that's a tunnel that's kind of at the base of Broadway. So you can visualize underground, great big pipe that goes all the way down along downtown.
Okay.
So step one to solving the downtown flood problem is to isolate that pipe because it's directly connected to the river. Okay? So we will install 2 valves at either end of that pipe, and that will isolate it from the river. So visualize this as well. So you're at Acme Feed at the base of Broadway.
Right.
At that corner, there's a storm drain inlet. That's the very, very first thing that will flood in Nashville, downtown. If you see water coming out of that storm drain, we've got a problem.
Okay.
Okay. So that storm drain is directly connected to that pipe that I'm talking about. Okay. So we've got to isolate that pipe from that storm and that storm drain from the river. So that's step one. Okay, step two, those 2 pipes I said that come down the hill from 8th Avenue Reservoir to the upstream side of the pedestrian bridge. Okay, those are stormwater pipes, and we have to plug those because the river will back up into those storm drains.
Right. And
flood backwards. And generally that's what got the symphony, because that backed up because it's directly connected to the river. So the river went up those pipes. So we have to block those. Okay, so now we've got the tunnel isolated, the 2 pipes coming down the hill, they're plugged. There's a lot of engineering behind all that, but that's the general approach.
Right, right.
Okay, now we build the wall, but now we have a real problem. So I want you to visualize yourself as a raindrop, and you fall out of the sky, and you land on top of the hill, on top of Rutledge Hill.
Okay.
You want to get to the river. Okay? On a day like today, if you fall out of the sky, you're going to actually go to the plant to get treated. But if it's raining cats and dogs, you're going to go to the river. Now you can't. Okay? Because we blocked you off, right?
Right.
So the flood wall works in both directions. It prevents the river from coming this way, but it also prevents the water from coming down the hill to get to the river.
I see that, right.
So without the pump station that picks up this water on the land side, we had to push it over the wall back into the river. So there's a whole series of things that have to be built in order for the system to work. The flood wall is the last thing, because when it's not raining, the flood wall isn't up. We have really nice looking piers that blend into the background that just stand there. They have a light on top. They look really pretty.
Right.
There's also in the new Ascend Amphitheater, the flood wall continues in there that we built while we were building that, so we didn't have to tear it up. And we also went down into the ground to prevent the water from flowing through the ground to the land side of the wall. So you have to isolate the pipe, plug the 2 drains coming down the hill, build the flood wall itself, and then build a pump station that brings the water to the river. That with all the water that lands on the land side, we have to get that to the river as well. So it is a system.
It's a system, and there's been talk about the flood wall, and that I guess concerns you, because what you want people to know is it's more than just a wall that's going to be protecting downtown. There has to be more done. If we just built a wall, that's not going to do it.
It'd be just a really pretty wall, and it wouldn't work. It's just a component of the system.
And all that said, how confident or how likely is it that's going to get done?
I'm hopeful that it will. It's obviously it's up to the council. I'm going to advocate that we build it, and that's my job. You know, as director of Metro Water Services, really my job description is risk mitigator. That's what I do. And as an engineer, I know I can fix that problem. So I'm going to take it to council, and I'm going to advocate on its behalf strongly, because I think it's a great idea. I'm also certain it'll work. We've modeled it on a computer. We've also built a model of downtown at a university. We built it and we tested it at scale. It works.
Well, that's good. The way politics works, sometimes you get one thing, not the other. Are you worried it gets done piecemeal?
Well, once again, we can't do it piecemeal.
Right.
If we build the pump station, then that's silly. If we build the wall, that would be silly. We have to build it all. And if we build it all, it'll work.
Fascinating. All right, let's go to Charlie here. Hello, Charlie.
Hello.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
I have a piece of commercial property at 1030 3rd Avenue South that floods from the storm sewer out front and the sewage sewer in the alley behind every time we get hard rains. With all of the new construction covering the ground and new pavement, those sewers, or at least the drains, are just not big enough to carry all that water. So it runs through the floor of my building and runs my tenants off. What can be done?
Well, if you would, Charlie, that number that we put on the screen, the 615-862-4600, please call that number in the morning, ask to speak to Stormwater, and we'll have someone come out and take a look. You said you're at 1030 3rd Avenue, so you're pretty much downtown, right?
Yes, and I called them over a month ago, and nothing's been done.
Okay, let me give you a little bit of a background on that. Since last Thursday, we've received over 200 requests for investigation. So we've got a lot on our plate, but I guarantee we're going to get in touch with you and identify what we can do to help.
So call that number, and we'll put it up again before the show's over. But that number is a critical number to call. What he's saying is, with all the new construction, all the pavement, that it's adding to the problems. Do you see that? What do you see there?
If you remember earlier in our discussion, I talked about not creating problems we have to solve later. We've tried really aggressively to mitigate any kind of additional flow coming off of a newly developed piece of property. So our approach with the development community is this. If you think about a square of land, we want them to capture the first inch of rain on that property before it leaves their property. Okay? And then, as it leaves their property, after the first inch, we want it to leave under a controlled fashion. That's how we try to engineer it. So the problem there is, it's the first inch. You know, if you get 3 inches of rain in an hour, then that design is not going to be adequate. You have to pick the design point and design to that. So the development community is working, I think, very well with us in trying to control that. But with additional development in impervious surfaces, that's going to cause challenges on runoff, especially with the urban redevelopment that we've seen, especially in the first ring of downtown. In 1940, 1950, you had one small home on maybe a quarter-acre lot. Now you're seeing 2 homes, maybe even more, on a quarter-acre lot. That introduces issues, and we're working hard to try to mitigate that. Right now, Nashville is in the most hot environment ever on development, and it is putting a little bit of burden on us. But I think with our regs and with cooperation with codes and with zoning that we have, I think we're doing a reasonably good job of addressing that. But there are going to be issues, especially in early developed areas, that we have to have a little bit more attention. And I think that's what's happening here. So we need to go see him personally.
All right, Charlie, thank you for that call. Let's go to Lucy. Hello, Lucy.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, what's on your mind?
Oh, I've got quite a few comments here, if you can just bear with me. We used to call what y'all call Sobro now. Back before the Civil War, it was called Black Bottom for a reason, because the river always backed up in there, and they let it back up in there, and people who lived there got cholera all the time, and they didn't care. But when you look, I've been stuck down there at First Avenue and Broad. I know not to get stuck down there during a heavy rain. It's always been that way. But directly across from Broad there on the East Bank, you've got water coming into the river right there from the East Hills over there in East Nashville. And when I was a kid, where old Avery Trace is, where Ellington Parkway is now, there is an entire creek under there. You could get a car or two in that creek when I was a kid. It was deep. We used to catch snapping turtles in there that were bigger than us. I mean, y'all were allowing them to build yacht clubs down at the mouth of Mill Creek and over there at White Creek. There used to be a Tennessee state law that you could not flood the guy down below you. And we're developing in this city with 30-degree pitch roof, 6-inch gutters, and on these just McMansions and these bigger square footages up creek from a lot of these people whose homes have been there, and like in the White Creek area for years, and there's just tons of water coming down. I've got a 30-degree roof on my house. I'm going to have to go to 6-inch gutters because it's never been able to manage it with 4, and that's what the developer put on it. So I just don't think we're paying attention to all the hills around here and the typography, and the state legislature here a few years ago let them change the directions of some of these creeks and brooks and everything.
All right, well, let's talk about all that. All right, Lucy, you bring up lots of good points.
I'm going to hang up.
All right, let's talk. Thanks, Lucy. All right, take whatever you want out of
Okay, let's start with the East Bank. What she's referring to, we call the Washington, D.C. regulator. And the Washington, D.C. was a manufacturing facility on the East Bank, and that used to be a stream. And that's an example of what we said on the west side that was bricked in. That's exactly what we have on the East Bank as well. From 1885 or so to 1950, all around Nashville, everything was captured, storm and sewer, and taken to the river. Sometimes those streams were bricked in and made into drains. So she's absolutely right. And it drains a very big basin. As a matter of fact, it's the second largest we have. The one I spoke of earlier from 8th Avenue and Vanderbilt, that's our Carrington Basin. It's the largest. So that's a legacy thing from 1885.
Right.
It's difficult to solve in a year. In 200 years, I would presume all those streams are going to be what we call daylighted, in that they'll be restored.
Really? Okay.
Because, you know, what's best? Earlier I said we don't want to fight Mother Nature, but if you think about the regulator that comes down the hill from Vanderbilt to the Woodland Street Bridge, just think about all the buildings that are on top of that stream. That's going to be massive urban renewal. That's going to have to be planned over 50 to 100 years. That's the kind of stuff that we'll eventually get to once we solve all the other stuff first.
Right.
And that is so far away into the future that we can't even think about it, because we have issues like she spoke about. People's homes are being flooded, and we're trying to solve those problems first. So for, you know, when Mr. DeMumbream showed up, there were no floodplain regulations until 1989. So you could do anything you wanted, literally.
All the way up until 1989. That's kind of amazing.
It is amazing. But in 1950, we had lots of land.
Right.
And it wasn't really thought of as a necessity to manage the stormwater. All the people cared about was getting it away as fast as possible. As the city grew and developed, then we started to see issues with how we managed it. And then we built along Mill Creek, we built along Whites Creek, we built along Richland Creek, and that creates problems. And we have to undo that. And we also have to prevent it from happening again.
And Lucy talked about McMansions and the slope of the roofs, I guess.
Right.
Is that a problem?
We spoke about that earlier.
We have to break? Okay, sorry. Well, all right, answer that, and then we'll break. I'm sorry.
All right, so we talked about the 1-inch capture. You know, that's an idea that we're pursuing, that kind of stuff. Specifically, Council Lady Berkeley Allen is very interested in that issue, and she's been a great leader along that. But you have to have a balance. Development and management. What is that balance? And that's what we try to identify.
That's fascinating. All right, we'll take a break. If you want to call, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.